Hey guys, Master Xeon here. In this video, I'm going to be discussing UV projection and texturing using Photoshop. This is based off of a reply someone sent me yesterday. Since the video I put out previously, I've received quite a few messages about just different things, which is good. Keep the questions coming. It's good to hear your ideas and thoughts and questions. I remember back when I was first learning Blender, I used to just keep a long list of all the things I wanted to learn from the software. Now, if you press Control Alt U on your keyboard, you can go into your Blender panel, and here you see where your image editor is pointing to. Now, right now, mine is pointing to GIMP 2.8. I'm going to actually set that to go to my Firefox. So let's bring up Firefox, and we see that it's located right there. So let's see, we'll just copy it and paste it there, and hopefully that should work. So now if I exit out of this, go into the UV image editor, don't worry about the geometry, and as you can see, I've already unwrapped it and set up some nice coordinates here. So with that, and it looks like it's not mirrored. This is actually an old file I was working with previously, but if we go into UV image mode, if we go into edit mode, you see over here there's no image assigned. So that means if I were to try to texture paint it, it would not take a texture, and if I tried to export it, it wouldn't export an image because there's not one there. So let's add one, and we're going to call this face, we'll just call it face UV. Hopefully this video will be pretty short, and we'll give it a generic color, and that's what we have. And here's our image, and you can also hit image and or go to UVs, and I believe there's an option to make it show the UV coordinates all the time, but whatever the case, there's no need for it. So we take our model, jump over into texture paint mode, and if you press Alt Z, we can go between just a standard shaded view and this one. And as usual, you can just come in and paint. Give them some whiskers. But painting from scratch in Blender on a face would take a very long time. So that's where it would be more advantageous to export it. So on the T panel under texture paint, you have these options down here that you can determine how big you want the image to be that you're exporting. So I'm going to say 1024. I'm also going to save this as, make a new directory, call this projectut, and we'll save it. And this image, will Control C over this to copy it, F3. Make sure that it's saved as a JPEG, and save it. So now we have that all taken care of. Now if we hit Quick Edit, then we have our whole head import. Someone was asking me why the head doesn't show when they import it, and I don't know, because it's always shown there for me. You just want to make sure in your user preferences that you have it set up here, and you also want to make sure that in the UV image editor this is showing up. You also see that I have Sonic on another layer, but that we'll get onto that later. I don't think it's even necessary to discuss. So in Photoshop, now we have this, Control 0, make it fit, Control plus in, and we have our guy. So I have some reference images over here. We're going to just use this girl. She's a real popular model. So we'll just find a good face shot. Try not to expose y'all to nudity, but reference images are just reference images. They are pictures of people. So we're going to just drop that on and lower the opacity. I suppose the first thing I want to do is just lasso draw around, copy, turn this layer off, make a new layer, Control V, and let me go ahead and grab my tablet. We can start getting to work on this. So as you can see, the process of exporting it to Photoshop is a lot easier. Like, we could accomplish all of this stuff in Blender, but you know, image editors is just so much easier, isn't it? Especially if you've already had a history with it and you come from that. I used to use Photoshop a lot before 3D came along, and I was turned on to the world of open source. This was my first love, but nowadays I try not to use Photoshop so much. Control T, or actually before we do that, let's lower the opacity. What is going on there? Minimize it, bring it back up. What? Minimize these. Alright, that was weird. I think that was probably some sort of OpenGL issue or something. If you hold Control, we can just move this around, Control T, and scale it to fit. It's not going to fit perfect, especially because, you know, the bottom is not correct. Now we want to bring the opacity back up a bit, maybe about there, and go and filter, liquefy. Ooh, that, okay, well, let's try a different way. We'll click on Edit, Free, or Transform, Warp. And how do you add different, how do you add more subdivisions to the warp? Let's see, edit, transform, warp. Well, let's just go ahead and just project this on, see what we got. Go into Blender, correct it with the clone brush once it's back on the 3D model. So we have this. Now we can choose save, but that wouldn't be very smart. Now we don't want to paint the head back on the model, so of course we turn that off so it only projects this. Save it. Maybe it's a PNG. Okay, and go back to Blender. Apply. And so that's what we got so far. So photo projection, of course, can work pretty well if you utilize it just right. I'll have to get back to y'all on the exact information on the clone brush. And we'll just scale this up. And just clone paint. And surprisingly, you can get some pretty good results just using this workflow and just getting a pretty nice UV setup and going and setting up the multiple maps. When it comes to the clone brush, you can hold control and tap and it will put your cursor wherever you want, so then you can begin cloning it. For the lips are just a different story. So we'll just put our thing here and just start painting in the lips. Alright, and we'll clone paint from here just over the upper lip. And right now I'm actually painting this in using a Wacom bamboo, like I always am using, until I get a better tablet. Alright, so the stroke direction, of course, there's a little bit of psychology to the clone brush in Blender. Like, you just gotta be aware of what's happening the further you go, and you can get pretty good with the clone brush. Alright, we'll turn this back to draw. Click this, hit the eyedropper, we'll take some of that red. Alright, let's try this again. We'll select that color. Shift F to increase the strength. Not that high. And we'll just paint around in here. Get rid of those eyeballs that aren't real. Just paint it red in there. Control Z. And we'll go back to a clone brush. And we'll just paint that in. Paint that in. And so we have a pretty decent UV going. But let's say I wanted to paint the side now. Well, F3, save the UV, because the UV doesn't save when you save the file. She looks like old woman over here. But I'm not looking too bad in my opinion. It could definitely be better. Like I said, if it wasn't a tutorial, we could just go all day on this. So now I've got it pointed from the side. Gonna choose quick edit. So go over to Photoshop and nothing's there. Alright, maybe I clicked apply. Let me make sure I didn't overwrite my UV, and I didn't. But you can't move your 3D object once you've set it up like that, or at least in my experience is. So we have it like this. We choose Quick Edit, and we bring back up our reference images, and we'll just drop this one in. And we'll go with our lasso tool and drag out a nice little selection. We'll skip the air. I wish he wasn't smiling in all of them. If you hold Control, you can shear it. So that's what you see me doing here, is shearing the texture or skewing it. And we'll go with our C. I thought the clone brush was C. That's silly. I always thought the clone brush was C. Let's see, what is it? Clone stamp is S. Alright, so we'll alt click here. We're just going to paint out these eyeballs. Now from here, alt tap to set up a new area. What kind of brush am I using? This one. Let's see, we'll back up a little bit. Alright, so, oh yeah, we'll also go ahead and just do away with this part. Alright, and of course remove the head again. Save the image. Make sure it's a PNG. And opening up Blender, if we hit apply, now we have this projection. And if we go over to the other side, quick edit, we have another image. Control A, Control C, go over to the new one, Control V, edit, transform, flip horizontal. We'll just use the CTRL button to line that up. Alright, and we'll just lay this in right about where her brows are actually now. Turn this off, crank up the volume, save. Go ahead and make sure it's saved as a PNG. I'm sure y'all are getting the idea by now. Apply, and is what we got. So I'm going to F3, save this as face UV 2, and make sure it's a JPEG. So now we have two UVs. We have our front, and then we have our sides that are painted rather well. So the trick I was showing y'all yesterday was we have our UV map, our first slide. So let's add a new one. Click the X, open up the front project, and we could jump between the two. So we're going to go to this map, which is our front project that I think is doing better. We're going to use the clone brush with project paint, turn on clone, and clone from the second map, or clone from the first map, sorry. And make the brush intensity higher. And just try to blend it in and get the two textures to mix and meet. Alright, so now we're definitely getting some results here, except the picture is still so dark. There we go. So not too bad if I say so myself. Another thing I might want to test is the possibility of going over here into Photoshop. I think Control J duplicates a layer. We're just going to go under Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. We want to blur it a bit, but we don't want to blur it too much. So we'll just Control F repeatedly to just keep blurring it, and then lower the opacity a bit. And that way it at least looks a little bit smoother. I mean, you compare it to before and it looks kind of pixelated in places, and that of course will give away your illusion. JPEG, overwrite, okay. Go back to Blender, go back to this image, and over here we'll just choose reload image, and under texture we'll just hit this reload button just to make sure. And I think it looks a little bit better that way. So the next things you would do from here is of course sculpt it, sculpt in skin pores, add a normal map. Sculpting would be the best way, and then you would probably make another cavity map, which you would have the bump information on that you could also help marry to the diffuse and begin getting somewhere with this. But I think you pretty much got the idea about how to set up in Photoshop and manage that. It's important to remember that whenever you make these, you also end up with a bunch of these images for every time that you project out. So you want to delete them. But as you can see on these, I always hide this layer and only export what I painted, so that way it doesn't reproject the head back on itself. So I hope that makes sense. And as always, if you have any questions, just drop me a private message or leave a comment. And thanks for watching. Happy blendering.